tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully self-enlightened one. My utmost respect to the perfectly enlightened Samma Sambuddha, the noble doctrine of the Buddha, and the noble Mahasangha, the disciples of the Buddha. Hello, dear Dhamma friends. Welcome to week 13 guest lecture series. Under this weekly guest lecture series, we will cover up more current and modern topics related to Buddhism to help benefit our community around the world. I certainly believe this effort by Dhamma USA is going to help the community to apply Buddhist teachings in a more practical level. Please mark your calendar every Thursday at 6 p.m. PST to get more benefit from this guest lecture series. Kindly check with Dhamma USA YouTube channel and Facebook page and Facebook groups for more updates. For today's topic, Buddhism and Science, we have invited another distinguished person to the special guest lecture series. Our guest speaker today, who has kindly accepted our invitation, is a doctoral degree candidate in Buddhist Studies at the University of the West, California. Some of her academic accomplishments are presented research papers at various national and international conferences, USA, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and India, teaching Abhidhamma Sangha and mentoring student studies at the Department of Pali, University of Mumbai, India. She has also served as a guest speaker at the Social and Educational Movement Society for Women Empowerment in Socially Engaged Buddhism. For more details of her career experience, you can check out dhammausa.org. Please welcome Dr. Vaishali Gaidhani. Good evening to you. How do you do?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm all fine. How are you,
I'm
Tinuri?
good, thank you.
So, may I share the presentation?
Yeah, so Dhamma friends, let us start today's session, and please kindly post your questions in the comments sections of Dhamma USA YouTube channel or Facebook page so that our guest lecturer can answer them at the end of the talk. Without further ado, Dr. Vaishali Gaidhani will start her presentation on Buddhism and science.
Thank you so much, Tinuri, for the introduction. And so, can you see the screen, the presentation screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And may I begin with the presentation?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Okay, so let us begin. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Today we are going to talk about Buddhism and science, and with due respect to all the venerables present, and also all the upasakas, I begin with the session on Buddhism and science today. So let us discuss what this is. In fact, would like to mention here before we begin that the purpose of this presentation is not to draw any comparison between Buddhism and science. The purpose of this presentation is to understand the Dhamma, the Buddhism, in a more clear way through the metaphors of our everyday life, especially related to science. Also, that we have the Dhamma is not comparable with anything lokia. Uh, because it is not comparable to anything that is worldly, we may not be able to compare it with anything that ways. So that because the Dhamma is lokuttara, um, it is out of this world, and therefore I urge all of you to understand it from the perspective of similes and metaphors that we would be using to understand science here and the Dhamma. So, in the contents, we have the source. The sources would be the Pali Tipitaka, the Theravada texts, which are available to us even today, and which almost form the complete set of the teachings of the Buddha, complete teachings of the Buddha for that matter. And then we have the introduction, and then the laws of physical nature that impact our outer world on human beings. And then we have the sustainable living aspect. This is the impact of human behavior on the outer world. And um, a furthermore, discussion about the Buddha's teaching, the Dhamma, and then we conclude. So, the sources, like I said, are the Pali texts, and we are going to refer majorly to the scientific aspect, the science that we know um, and um, and learn about. So this presentation, like I said, is not a comparison between Buddhism and science. Just the laws and concepts of physics are being used here to understand as metaphors the more intricate aspects of the Dhamma. So, part one is the physical sciences aspect, and part two is the sustainable development aspect. Now, the common factor between the, the teachings of the Buddha and the physical laws of nature that we see is that they are based on cause and effect. What we see around us is the effect, and what we try to understand, whether it is in the physical nature around us, the material nature around us, is the cause. So, keeping that in mind, we understand that the whole world around us is surrounded on all sides with certain things, some material things, which we call as the environment. Those things which we see with our eyes, we hear through our ears, and the other senses that we use. The ground below on which we stand, walk, lie down, and and also the infinite sky above is what we are surrounded with. So, what do we do basically? So, we build houses to protect us from any dangers that come to us from any of the sides. And then, our ancients, specifically, if we look at, they had these open spaces more than we have today. But we know that they were not as much technically advanced as we are. So we see how the differences, how the development of human beings from the anthropological point of view also that that led us to the technology that we have today. And our ancients, they saw some events happening around, and then they were ignorant of why these weird kind of things were showing up, like lightning, thunder, and so on. And in their attempt to ward off these seeming dangers, they developed myths and rites and rituals, which also did not guarantee complete safety. So, we have some early physicists or scientists who tried to know, who tried to understand what these things are, because there has to be some reason for anything that is happening around us, is what they believed. And we can see today that even when we use the law, the Pythagoras theorem is was laid down at that time in the 5th 6th century BCE, that as early as that. And then we have a series of scientists developing um, their own theories, like Aristotle. You know, these were the giants that have given us the science we have today, and the material world what we can see today. So now Aristotle, if we see, is called as the father of scientific method, an empirical method with evidences. So these evidences, they were like concrete evidences which showed people how things happen around us. And these evidences then led to the beliefs and understandings and theories which we have developed, or the scientists have developed over a period of time. Again, we know about Archimedes. The pulley machine is still being used, the screw pulley still being used for irrigation purposes to draw water. Okay, and then the pi calculations and so many more other measurements that have happened, like the volume measurement of any body equal to the displaced water, and that's how he coined the term eureka. And we have Galileo again. Very recently, we can say that's there's a long gap of certain discoveries which never happened, which where science did not progress as much. But very recently, since the time of Galileo Galilei, who's called as the father of modern science by Einstein, so in the 16th century, 17th century, you can see that a lot of things took shape as per the modern science, because Galileo Galilei, he discovered the telescope for the first time and saw in outer space, saw that uh, the earth, or the movement of the sun around the earth, um, is not what it is. It is the other way around. It is the earth moving around the sun, which is called as heliocentric, not geocentric, what was believed earlier. Then we have Isaac Newton. We know that the laws of motion, uh, which Isaac Newton had proposed way back in the 18th century, are still being used today to calculate the speeds of the satellites in motion in outer space. So, but yes, with many corrections on the way. And then everybody is aware about Albert Einstein, the brightest of the brains of the human beings. So when we talk about Einstein, there are many things, because it's very recently that he has passed away. That was in 1955. So we know that there are living beings who have actually met him. So, because of his superior brain intelligence, he is considered one of the genius of that the human race has ever produced. Even in the last millennia, the Time magazine showed up his picture as the man of the millennium. And we know that it is Einstein in 1921, he put up the theory of the photoelectric effect, and that he also showed that the speed of light is 3 into 10 to the power 8 meters per second is the fastest speed in universe. And there can be nothing that can go beyond that speed, can go beyond that mark of mm, the any body which is in motion. So these are certain things which have already happened. And if we see now, very recently in 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics gone to three people, three physicists who are again genius in their own way, and Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger. So here, what is the discovery that they have made, that they have discovered in quantum information science? Now, this is something which which falsifies Einstein's theory. However, quantum mechanics is coming up from the photoelectric effect devised by Einstein, but then Einstein believed in certainty, determinism, and that's why he said God does not play dice. But here, these three scientists, with at that time it was John Stuart Bell, Heisenberg, Pauli, and so many other scientists who who took up this quantum mechanics theory further. But Einstein, at that point, he just said that it is something spooky happening at a distance. So this theory of quantum information science refutes what Einstein says, and and is a new theory which is going to be a breakthrough into the technical domain. Uh, it because it transfers information instantaneously. There is no time lag. It doesn't require. We have the mobile phones today, the information technology, but these phones or even the computers that we use today they have a time lag. But here there is no time lag, and therefore many corporates are after this kind of technology that's going to be utilized in future. So keeping that in mind, so we that's about the Nobel Prize for Physics, which we have already spoken about, quantum level entanglement, and and that it is instantaneous transportation of information from one point to another out there in space, wherever the two entangled bodies are placed. One can be on the Earth, other can be billions and billions of light years away. So that is how the breakthrough technology is there. And then we have okay, let us move ahead because we have to keep to the time. And now, introducing what the concept over here is. The sky initially was a very curious thing for our ancients. They looked at the sky to know the stars and developed geometry. To measure, they developed mathematics. And then to seek the cause of those things, developed physics and provable experimental instruments like Galileo discovered the telescope in the 17th century. Now, the telescope is something that is being used even today with more advanced technologies. So, here, the reason that we see the nature around us is that is because scientists eventually did learn the cause of things that happened. Like, for example, lightning, if we see, earlier people didn't know what lightning was, but then why it was happening. But then later on, scientists explained why it is happening. It is actually a discharge of electricity, the negative ions in the cloud wanting to connect to the positive ions on the earth. So that is the basic fundamental behind the concept of electricity behind it. Now, the curiosity of the unknown is the driving force to know the real truth behind the nature of things. And here, by nature, we mean the behavior or conduct. So, nature is environment around us. Nature is also the behavior or the conduct as per science. And then the definition of science, there are very many people, and even in dictionaries, there are so many definitions put up. But the state of knowing, knowledge as distinguished from ignorance or misunderstanding, that is one of the definitions we can see in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which relates more to the nature of things. And yes, and few more definitions over here. So the thing is, rather than a single uniform entity, science is probably best defined as a collection of related and partially integrated events. However, Nobel physicist Murray Gell-Mann, he said science is a sentence that can be disproven. So here comes the limitation of science. The limitation, why can it be uh, disproven? It doesn't mean that science is flawed. It means that science is a subject to inquiry. Old facts are disproved. New theories can be formulated and new experiments and advanced techniques, thus evidently leading to old facts getting falsified. What is science today is subject to modification tomorrow. So science is not flawed, it is just subject to modification. That is the definition of science, which I have um, devised is an ongoing evolving process of experimental trials at the given point in time, with observations affected by human error, yet motivated towards refinement through further research and supporting advanced technologies. Nothing in science is final or ultimate. And in science, a very important thing is seeing with measure. Therefore, we have all the technologies, whatever it is, the outer space, or even we have microscope at the minute level, and at the magnified level, we have the telescope. So very recently, until now, we had the Hubble telescope, but now we also have the James Webb telescope with a very, very high resolution, and it's placed in space, circle orbiting the Earth. So telescopes have our eyes. These are our eyes, and with these eyes, we can see the past billions and billions of years ago. And that is how we see the difference of the technological advancement. Those are the images, the previous images, and the James Webb Space Telescope showing us billions of light years away from us. It means it is showing us almost to the origin of the of this universe, if they say that the Big Bang happened billions of years away. So so here the theory is about the ever expanding theory of the Big Bang, which there are alternative theories of for continuous process of expanding and contraction happening. But here, the Big Bang theory would be really proven with the help of the James Webb Space Telescope. So no scientist doubts that the universe is now in an expanding state. Even then, there are hundreds of billions of stars and galaxies stretching, and we have the Milky Way with so many stars, 200 billion stars, and that's how we see from the Earth. And these are the number of stars in the universe, 2 into 10 to the power 23, astounding and humbling, right? The worldview in the Tipitaka, however, it talks our Tipitaka talks about the external world as well as the internal world. And what matters more is not the external, but the internal world, because it is the internal world that influences the external world. And the human body, for that matter, is made up of hydrogen. Is understood by astronomers that hydrogen and carbon are the elements that are from the distant stars, from the beginning, or from billions of years away. They are the stardust of which we are made up of. That's how hydrogen and carbon atom uh, is made up of due to pressure, heat, and um, and that's how multiple forms of complex atoms made. That's how they explain scientists explain how matter is formed. Now, entropy is another aspect wherein heat, motion, and time causes decay of things. And the Buddha in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta said all compounded things can be brought to dissolution via Dhamma Sankhara. So here in our Tipitaka, there are these lot of books, each relating to different things, the prime ones being the Vinay Pitak, Sutta Pitak, and the Abhidhamma Pitak, and all books listed under it. Vinay Pitak is the practice. That's the rule of disciplines there. Sutta Pitak are the discourses of the Buddha. And Abhidhamma Pitak is the deeper science of the ultimate truths. So Abhidhamma is a higher subtle teaching. The two truths, Samuti Satya, that's a conventional truth, and Paramatha Satya is the ultimate truth. A being is made up of mind and matter. Mind is the Nam aspect, so there are the four components of mind, and Rupa are the 24, the material aspect. So out of which four of them are uh, the Mahabhuta, the greater elements, and 24 are the other, of which every human being is made up of. Now, the Paramatha Satya, the ultimate realities or absolute truths, they are four. Chitta, that's mind, Chetaseka, that's mental formations, and Rupa is matter. Now, these are very well laid down, defined in the Abhidhamma. And the Nibbana aspect, we for understanding the Abhidhamma, we need Panyati, that's the conceptual understanding of it. However, Nibbana is the absolute truth and it does not contain any Panyati or concepts. Now, Panyati as concepts, it's like two forms. One is the name, and the other is the form and shape. So here, the Nama Panyati is the name Panyati, and the shape and forms, Santana Panyati, given upon shapes and forms. So this is how Santan means Samuha. Samuha comes from Paramatta, the absolute truth. And then we have the four majors: earth, water, fire, and air. And these give rise to the Samuha, the repeated combinations of the Mahabhuta. And therefore, we have the smallest element called the Atta Kalapa. Atta Kalapa, it has 8 components in it, and it is Avinibhoga. Avinibhoga is non-divisible. So this form is a combination of 8 elements. The four Mahabhutas, Patvi, Vayu, Apo, Tejo, and then their characteristics, Lakhana, Varna, Gandha, Rasa, Oja. That's the visible object, the form, the scent, the odor, the taste, and the nutriment. This is the smallest atom, or smallest equivalent to the smallest particle, like atom in science. So we know the atom is further divided into electrons, protons, neutrons. So this is the one can equate it in this way to understand, or maybe an analogy. So the Nam component, or the mind, is Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vinyan. So the mind has 4 components. The mind is the bigger factor here. It's 80% of what we are, and the Roop is just the 20%. So here again, the mind consists of feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. So the Buddha in the Dhammapad, first verse, said Mano Bubbangama Dhamma. So the mind here, Mano, is the Chitta. The Chitta comes foremost, and the Dhamma is the Chetasika. That means all of this is the mind component, and it is the mind which is foremost, which comes first, which is preceded by all of our actions of speech and body. So, Mano, mind, is called as Mano, and then the Kaya and Vacha, those are the actions. So, 3 types of actions: Manokamma, Vachikamma, and Kaya Kamma, bodily action. And Buddha said in this Anguttara Nikaya 1.48 that nothing is faster in the world than the arising of a chitta. The Buddha's Dhamma says, again, when we are defining about nature, the Buddha said, whatever is the nature is the same when you see me. So mang passati, so dhammang passati. Yo dhammang passati, so mang passati. And this universal law of nature, what the Buddha defined as the Paticca Samuppada, that was the discovery of the Buddha. And this discovery of the Buddha is what is laid down in the Four Noble Truths. Again, another aspect of nature that we see is in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where the Buddha says, the Dhamma and Vinaya will be your teacher after me. So again, here the Dhamma means the spoken words of the Buddha Vachana, or whatever is laid down in the Tipitaka. So the nature has multiple meanings in the Buddha's teaching. The prime one, the Dhamma, the universal law of nature, is the Paticca Samuppada, and that is the law of dependent origination. This is the enlightenment of the Buddha. And the cause of suffering which was the ultimate goal of the Bodhisattva, to find the cause of suffering, to remove this cause of suffering from the people, is tanha and avijja. These are the two things. Tanha, craving, and avijja, ignorance. And knowing that it is so hard for the people to understand this difficult Dhamma, the Buddha formulated the Paticca Samuppad, the complex understanding of avijja, pachaya, sankhara, sankhara, pachaya, vijnana, all those 12 links, into the simple formulation of the Four Noble Truths. The first time in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, when the Buddha expounded this teaching of the Four Noble Truths to the Panchavagya Bhikkhu, the group of five bhikkhus, these group of five bhikkhus could understand, the first one being Kondanya Thera. So he understood, heard the Buddha's teaching, understood it, and could grasp it. So this is the scientific aspect, again, of the Buddha's teaching, that it can be explained, taught, people can listen, understand, implement it, and then can also reach the state of Nibbana. Now, again, when of the one of the Bhante of the Panchavagya bhikkhus, that's Venerable Assaji, when he was on alms round, Upatissa, who was later known as Venerable Sariputta, was so keen to know the Dhamma. And we could see that in the Dhammapad verse 10:11, that Upatissa and Kolita, that means Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana later, they went around the whole of the Jambudweep, the whole of the subcontinent, to know what the Dhamma is, to find the cause of why phenomena happen the way they do. How do things happen the way they do? And here, when Upatissa sees Bhante Assaji, and he says, just tell me the Dhamma in one word, the one meaning, just a meaning of the Dhamma that the supreme teacher has explained. So here he says, Bhante Assaji says, Ye Dhamma hetu pabhava, te sang hetu tathagato aha, te sanchayo nirodho evang vadi mahasamano. Right then and there, Upatissa attained Sotapanna stage. That means the Dhamma, when expounded by the Arhanta disciples of the Tathagata, also people attained the stages of the path to Nibbana. So this is the power, and this is how the scientific aspect of Dhamma is right here in this world. All phenomena are due to a cause. The Tathagata reveals the cause and also the removal of the cause. Thus speaks Supreme One. And then the Dhamma, when we see the Four Noble Truths, the first Noble Truth is the effect of the second Noble Truth of suffering. So this gives us an understanding that how the suffering is accumulated. What is the cause of that? And it is tanha, it is craving, that is the cause. And in Abhidhamma, we call it the lobha chetasika. The uh, And then we have the third noble truth as the effect, that is the Nibbana, as the effect of the fourth noble truth. That's the Magga or Aryo Attangiko Maggo, or the path to Nibbana. That this is the path, the eightfold path of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. So this is the complete Four Noble Truths, and this is the path to the end of suffering, of human suffering. And of this noble eightfold path, where do we begin with? So we begin with the ethics, the sila, the practice in our conduct in our day-to-day lives. The ethics, the sila, fall in right speech, right action, and right livelihood. They are also the virati in the Virati Chetasika in the Abhidhamma. Now we come to the second part. The second part is about sustainable living on this planet. We all know that the situation on this planet. We know that uh, there has been activity going on in space to move to another destination because the requirements, the human requirements, the needs of human are not met here on this earth with the growing population, with the growing need for resources, with the growing, there are so many factors, and um, that human development is towards establishing colonies outside on the of this earth on different places, like let's say the moon, or maybe other planets in future. So now when we are looking at this aspect, it seems that we need about 2.5 earths to fulfill our need today. And considering all of this, even with the development that is happening, how much ever we incorporate the physics of the building development, like like reducing energy, reducing, we put in so many technologies, we do computer simulations to understand beforehand how much of energy would be required, how much can we save, how much water can we save, so many measures being implemented. Yet, and also there's climate change and environmental exploitation for human needs. Yet, even after putting in all of these technological measures, um, earnest solution implementation is lacking. And therefore, uh, we talk about all these things, yet we do not find concrete solutions coming up. So we have these, on a global level, we have sustainable development goals, and there are, right from school level, there are like this is for St. Louis City. On their website, they have for children and for their people. They have put in such a beautiful way to reduce, reuse, recycle, um, and people do want to do all of these things in their limits. However, the limits that are there are that we are facing today majorly can be classified into two. One is the resources that are limited for every human being, and the other is the lifetime that we have. Every being has this limitation, and because science rests upon human activities, sensory information, and communication, it is subject to errors that are potential within each of these realms. So here in the Buddha's Dhamma, when we practice Sila, the virtuous practice, the first stepping stone to Dhamma, the Buddha's method of teaching takes into account the limiting aspect of human error. How it incorporates into the seal aspect, it does not say that I will not kill living beings, but rather it says, I undertake the training, the precept, the training of abstaining from killing living beings. It means that it is something that is to stop doing by our conduct. But the conduct is not in that way. Further, it is practiced with loving kindness for all beings. So that is the earlier one, when we stop doing it, is the Varita seal. And when we are actually practicing it in our conduct, the loving kindness is the Charita seal. So this is how the human errors are factored into the practice of the teachings of the Buddha. That is how the Buddha has, with so much compassion, made it so very applicable by human beings who are having limitations to practice and purify themselves. So, here in Savatthi, that's the location, many discourses are given by the Buddha over here in Savatthi. And, and the 5 precepts, even this discourse is given at Savatthi. Uh, Anand Athera, he asks the question in Dhammapad verse 54 and Anguttara Nikaya 3.8. It mentions, what is the best fragrance, sandalwood or flowers? And the Buddha answers that following the 5 seal has the best fragrance, more than sandalwood, more than flowers. And it is And why is it so? It is because a virtuous person who's following the Sila, he goes in all directions practicing the Sila. And therefore, even against the direction of the breeze, the fragrance of a person practicing Sila goes forth. And then the Hiri and Otappa. Hiri and Otappa, Hiri is shame of wrongdoing, and Otappa is fear of wrongdoing, and that is respect for others. And this is, Hiri is our own self respect. So, Buddha says that these two are the guardians of the world, the two bright qualities that protect the world. Dve Sukha, Dhamma Lokang Palanti, Sanguttar Nikai 2.9. And these qualities cultivate in human heart good moral standards that are helpful for a living. When these qualities wane from our heart, it is not only harmful for our living, making it unsustainable individually, environmentally, socially, and politically, but also that the human behavior is no less than an animal realm. And then, why do we have this fear of blame? Is because of the wrongdoings. Akusalakamma, savajjam, dukkha vipaka lakhanam. That is because of the wrongdoings, what is wrong. Like the Buddha has explained what is right and wrong in the Mangala Sutta, 38 right and right. What 38 things that are right and wrong. So the fear of blame has four causes. Self-reproach, being accused by others, fear of punishment, and law and order is the most important one, because all over the world, their constitution is based on whether anyone knows it, any country knows it or doesn't know it, but these five precepts are those universal precepts followed by all the countries, and all of the countries of the world have this in their constitution of non-killing, non-stealing, and so on. Fear of evil of destiny and karmic result. Yes, even those who are inclined towards spiritual development have this fear. And therefore, we have the Kusala Kammapat, 10 Kusala things to do, which are which are mentioned in the Salayaka Sutta again. And the three Kaya Kusal Kamma, that means Panati Pata Veramani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami. The complete thing, what we have spoken about right now. So Panati Pata, to refrain from Panati Pata, killing, to refrain from what stealing, to refrain from misconduct, are the three conducts of the body. And then the four conducts, good conducts of the speech are, again, not lying, to refraining from lying, slandering, harsh speech, frivolous talk. We know, all of us know about this. And then the manokamma, refraining from like covetousness, hatred, and wrong view. So these are the 10 kusala kamma. And then what is inside of us is outside of us. Moreover, is through the Vipassana meditation technique that we see. And right now that we are in the age of information, as suggested in the Vipassana meditation and scientific worldview by Paul Fleischman, that this world is both informatic, that means lawfully according to the Dhamma, and entropic, that's with errors, with decay, disease. Both of these things exist, are there in this world. And the compounds are entropic and subject to decay, whereas Nibbana, Dhamma, is not a compound thing and is not subject to decay. And there are the other sides of quantum mechanics. Um, I would like to conclude, mm, uh, with your permission, would take just 2 minutes to conclude. Um, Here, what Bhikkhu Bodhi Bhante writes is so much meaningful, related to sustainability. The driving forces of the human heart have remained fairly constant through the ages, and the toll they've taken in human misery surpasses calculation. But what we find today is a strange paradox that would be interesting if it were not sinister. While there appears to be a much wider verbal acknowledgement of the primacy of moral and human values, there's at the same time more blatant disregard for the lines of conduct such values imply. This undermining of the traditional ethical values is in part a result of the internationalization of commerce and the global penetration of virtually all media of communication. Vested interests in quest of wider loops of power and expanding profits mount a sustained campaign aimed at exploiting a moral vulnerability. And the Buddha's teaching at its core is the doctrine of liberation that provides us with the tools for cutting through the fetters that keep us bound to this world of suffering, the repeated rounds of birth. Although the quest for liberation by practice of the Dhamma depends on individual effort, this quest necessarily takes place within a social environment and is thus subject to all the influences, helpful or harmful, imposed upon us by that environment. And the conclusion, so the primary goal, there are a few questions which I've raised here about what is the ultimate goal to remove suffering. And the choice depends, whatever we choose depends on us, that we have the freedom at this moment now. And that the Buddha in the Aganya Sutta, Digha Nikaya 27, says, Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Appamadena Sampadeta. And these were the last words of the Tathagata, because the Tathagata also explained us in the Aganya Sutta that this samsara is without a discoverable beginning. And this, whatever is to be done, which is mentioned in the Four Noble Truths, Satcha Kitcha Katang, whatever is to be done is the last words of the Buddha, urging us to do, to, to be vigilant and practice the Dhamma. Bhavatu Sabba Mangalam. May we all understand the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha's Dhamma to dispel the darkness of ignorance and for the cessation of suffering. Nibbanasa Pachayohotu with Metta. Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu. And I thank you all for this, for the patient listening. Thank you so much. And I thank Bhante for giving me this opportunity to speak today to all of you. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Tinuri, you are mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your great presentation. I'm sure all our Dhamma friends around the world were benefited today. Dhamma friends, we will take up your questions now, and we encourage you to post your questions through the Dhamma USA YouTube channel. Okay, so we have a question from Dhamma USA. How is Buddhism practiced in the busy urban life today?
Thank you for that question. And I would like to talk about, there are so many ways we can do this. Um, but I would just like to share my experience over here. A few years back, it was like this working in a position which demanded a lot of time. And I was like, I had this inner urge that I wanted to learn the Dhamma, because as we all know, that we have limited time with us. On the other hand, we have the Dhamma available to us today in this human life. How precious is this human life in that sense? And how does it then matter as to how we want to share our time, a time of life? So it is in this urge, with this urge, I decided that having fulfilled the basic necessities or basic responsibilities, I moved myself or turned towards or sharing more of my time towards the Dhamma activities. For example, when I found out that it's so busy, and in this busy life, if we want to really refine our work that we do and want to bring in value, then it is important that we also meditate for some little time, right? Because that organizes our mind, and it then helps us to be lesser busy, you know, so we can do our work in lesser amount of time, whatever work is to be done through the day. So there are simple things that we can follow in our day-to-day lives, to and sometimes when we are actually following the sila practice for that matter, here it becomes like the five, the panchasila, can be followed on a day-to-day basis. It is not something that requires an additional amount of time to follow. In everything that we do in our life, we can follow we can try our best to refine ourselves, uh, and um, and follow the five precepts. So it is with skillfulness that we want to develop, uh, through the busy schedule that we have. However, both of the things are important. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that was really helpful even for myself. We do have another question from Dhamma USA. Do you think knowledge of modern science is helpful to understand Buddhism better?
Thank you again for this wonderful question. Mm, I I was academically I have pursued physics as my subject, and as a way of living, kind of, an ajivika, you can say, way of living, uh, in samsara. However, when I am sharing my own example over here because I feel that it is so very relevant in this aspect. Physics has given me an understanding, basic understanding, to think with cause and effect. That is, why is so? Asking questions. That's what science does. Why is it so? Why does it? Why things happen? Because like the example that we have seen of lightning, earlier people didn't know. They set up so many myths behind the lightning aspect. But when people started knowing, like for example, the earlier president of United States, Benjamin Franklin, he he found out that lightning can be uh, there is a way out to to um, to meet that danger, and he was the one who got the electric rod on high buildings, which uh, prevented the danger to tall buildings and trees and so on. So from this physics aspect is the mindset, which helped me to reach the reason behind things. This is one of it. The second aspect is a small example in the Anguttar Nikaya is that Bhante Anand inquires with the Buddha, Tathagata, how do you how do beings in outer space hear your voice? In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, we know that beings out of outer space, that's Sahasi Lokadhatu, so many uh, galaxies away, the beings over there, they heard the Dhamma. In this case, what I have come across, the answer that usually the Buddha never answered such kind of questions which were not relevant for removing suffering, removing dukkha. So Buddha always used to avoid those kind of questions which did not matter for us people, just the handful of leaves that the Buddha gave. So here the Buddha three times tries to avoid the question, but Bhante Ananda still insists on asking that question. And then the Buddha says, okay, I will tell you how I do that. And the Buddha says, the sound waves, my sound waves, first I send the light waves, and over that I superimpose my sound waves. And this was a moment of realization, a revealing moment for me, because as a physicist, I know that in vacuum, light travels. but sound doesn't. Sound requires a medium to travel. And when I found this answer in the Tipitaka, what the Buddha answered, Anante, it was a moment of awe for me. And that is how I could understand it immediately. So this is how for me, modern science is helpful to understand Buddhism better. Thank you.
Wow, doctor, that was really interesting. Your answer. I think that's really cool how like the Buddha responded in that way of like the message to be sent out through sound waves. I never really thought it like that, and this is also something that I was concerned about too, like if Buddhism and science can go together or if it like kind of like doesn't overlap well. So you really answered that question well for me too, like something that I've had in the back of my head. So thank you.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
Um, we have another question from Dhamma USA. Okay. In your presentation, you mentioned about the scientific formula that the mass can be turned into energy. Do you think the supernatural power, such as itivita, or being able to perform such actions, as ability to appear and disappear, something like that?
Can I see the earlier part of the? Yeah, thank you. And the second part? Okay, thank you. So when we are talking about the attainments uh, that one that one can achieve through the practice of the Dhamma. So these are the attainments like idavida, idhi, right? It's an attainment of it's a maybe one can say that one has developed um, in the practice of these things. However, E is equal to mc square. That's the famous equation of Einstein, and it says energy can be converted uh, into mass instead of the of that way one can say that mass can be converted to energy. That's a more applicable kind of situation. Now if you look at the equation, it is E is equal to m, the mass, into c square. That's Einstein's equation. Now c is the speed of light over here, and that's the tremendous amount of energy over there, of the speed of light. It's like 10 to the power of 8 into 10 to the power of 8, because c is squared there, so 10 to the power of 16. So a small amount of mass, just 1 gram of mass, we can calculate how much 10 to the power of 16 amount of the energy that one can get by that amount of mass. But again, over here, what happens with our people, with human beings, is that most of the energy is utilized in friction, in the kind of the our habitual entropy, what you can say, in whatever we do. And it's not 100% that this energy is utilized. Therefore, for human beings like us who have not attained any stage, is we require more amount of mass in this case. But in case of those who have attained, they will have their own minimum requirement of the food intake in terms of mass, and therefore the realization of 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 more energy. Now this is something that is a byproduct, and in the Dhamma, the Buddha does not encourage us to perform or practice any such kind of thing. And moreover, it is also that that um, we do not think that ways. It is more useful that we think that um, the Dhamma is for the removal of suffering. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do have one question, Doctor.
Mhm.
So, what is your advice on trying on like bringing back the mind into the present moment when there's past things that come up or thinking too far ahead
Okay.
in the future?
Uh-huh.
Like to
So,
take care of like what's right in front of me. Sometimes I realize these days um I'm like kind of having trouble with that. So I wanted to know your advice. I'm also a college student, so with that, it's really helpful. Like I need to be able to like focus on my education, not think too much of anything.
okay. So for college students, youngsters, who maybe you have practiced um, the meditation technique. Anapanasati is a very, very basic meditation technique. Or
Mhm.
even if you have not practiced it, even then, this is a very common thing that sometimes we are, with our mind, we are engaged into something, but yet we have either some past thing coming in our mind or maybe something of the future. So here, whatever it is the sati aspect, the mindfulness aspect over here that we are talking about, and uh, and it is human to have all these kind of things happening with us because we've been just living with it, right? All this while, and things are not going to change suddenly, overnight. So here, what do we do then in such a situation? Is we just wanna we just want to say, okay, just accept what it is. The first thing, just say, oh, this is happening, and then, but I have to do this right now. So take a moment to accept, and then, so this is like, and then focus on the present. So if you have done anapana or vipassana makes it more easy to do this. Like, okay, uh, just focus on your breath, incoming, outgoing, and watch your body. So I think immediately you will find the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Um,
It's a trial. It's like we keep trying, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely like know that meditation helps with that a lot. These days I've been like slacking on that, but it's a good reminder to start that again so that I can like work on this. Yeah. So thank you. Um, so with that, it looks like we don't have any more questions for the night. So, with that, we conclude today's guest lecture and we look forward to meeting you with more interesting topics like this in the coming weeks. Please contact us if you have an interesting and useful topic, and we would also like you to invite if you are interested in joining us in the weekly guest lecture series. I would like to sincerely thank our guest lecturer for kindly accepting our invitation for this guest lecture series. May you always be well, happy, and healthy. Let's also keep our palms together close to our heart and pray that by the power of all the dana, sila, bhavana activities that we all have performed during our lifetime and during our whole course of samsara, become one united power and may it be shared with all the celestial beings. May all the wonderful celestial beings, including respectful Brahmas and Devas, and all such beings receive this merit and share this merit and be well, happy, and healthy wherever they are. May all your departed ones also receive this merit and be well, happy, and healthy, safe wherever they are. May all of us be able to live life peacefully, comfortably, and with good health. May all of us and all sentient beings be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, the absolute peace and happiness at the end of our samsara. Thinking thus, please keep your palms close to your heart and say sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba buddhanubhavena sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba dhammanubhavena sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba sanganubhavena sada soti bhavantu te. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante, for letting me speak today. See you again next week at the same time, and have a good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night, Tinari.